Just joining us tonight, more troubling breaking news out of Japan tonight at this nuclear complex where all 6 reactors are in distress. Tonight, a new fire reported at reactor number 4 in an area where the spent fuel rods are kept. Those are huge used fuel rods. They're still highly radioactive, and they're kept close to the roof outside of the strongest containment structures. With us once again to assess all this is Arnie Gunderson, who's a nuclear safety advocate who consults with Vermont state government about the Vermont Yankee plant. And Mr. Gunderson, you were telling us at the top of the show how familiar you are with these spent fuel rods. I just want your assessment once again for our viewers. If we're told there was a fire there the other day in this same area, a fire detected tonight, somebody saw some flames, they believe it burned after about 30 minutes. They say they could no longer see any more flames. Obviously, there's a cooling issue there. What are the risks and what needs to be done urgently?
The urgent thing is you have to keep water going into that nuclear fuel pool. It's not being cooled. They're just pumping salt water in and it's boiling off, almost like a pot on a stove. It's going to just boil off, but you have to keep making up for what's boiling off. If the water drops and the fuel becomes exposed, it causes a very high gamma ray exposure on site. We almost had this here in the United States at Dresden 1 back in the 90s, where a fuel pool began to drain, and the calculations showed that if that happened, the entire site would have been uninhabitable. So it's critical that all that water stay in that pool, just for the sake of the gamma rays that are shooting out of the fuel on site. But worse than that is the chance that the fuel will catch fire because it's hot, and the zircaloy, which it's made of, can combust. If that happens, all of this radioactivity will become an aerosol, and it doesn't have a containment around it. This is in the spent fuel pool, and the way this reactor is designed, these Mark I reactors, they don't have a containment around that spent fuel pool, so that it's a real concern. The fire could liberate as much radioactivity or even more than the accidents that are occurring at Unit 1, 2, and 3.
And let's come back to that point, because we have 6 units in distress, and in 3 of them, including where we have the fire tonight in Reactor 4, the issue is the spent fuel rods, which are not as protected. They're not inside what's supposed to be a secure containment shell, and we'll get to that point in a minute about Reactor 2. But if you have one where you've had a fire and 2 others where you have this issue, number one, you've assessed the threat pretty well. There are only about 50 people here. They've evacuated more than 400 workers. Are 50 people enough to handle 6 reactors in distress?
You know, normally one reactor will have 100, so there should be 600, 700 people on the site. Basically, you're saying 10 persons per reactor. No, they must be doing maybe 1 or 2 single critical things, and I hope one of those is pushing water into that fuel pool. All the other things that need to be done, they've obviously determined that they can't afford the exposure to these 400 or 500 people that have been relieved. Now, by sending those people off site, you can then bring them in over the course of the next couple days and manage your dose to the personnel that are on site. The standard is 5 rem per year for each of these guys. In an accident, you can go higher, but still, you don't want to overexpose your personnel. So my guess is they pulled back their personnel and will bring them in very few at a time to just do the most critical things, because they simply have a limited labor pool who's really familiar with that plant, and they don't want everybody to get an overexposure.
I want to ask you a question. I have just a mock-up of the reactor here, and we were just showing what the spent rods look like. But the questions about reactor number 2 yesterday were down in here, the Taurus, down here at the bottom, where you have supplemental pools of water. And we still have not got good questions. We know they were pumping water in. We know they said they were pumping water in, and then the level suddenly dropped. What does that tell you, based on everything you've seen and heard and read about the problem they're having in number 2, where yesterday they thought they might have a full meltdown?
When the level dropped and when the pressure changed the way it did, it was almost simultaneous with the large explosion. And that tells me that the containment breached. The other 2, units 1 and 3, probably have minor leaks in their containment, but unit 2 has a major leak in its containment. Now, what's happening is they're pushing the water in, and steam is coming out, and with that steam is coming radioactive material. So Unit 2 is always releasing radioactive material through the breach, wherever it is.
And I want to come back, and I'm showing a map here. This is satellite images of all 6 of these reactors, 4 in a row here and 2 over here. 4 is where the fire is, and we use the term fire, and layman would think, okay, a fire. You light something and you see the flames. Explain the difference in the sense that if they're seeing flames here, if these spent rods are so hot that people are seeing flames, describe the situation, the temperature at that location.
Yeah, there's 2 possibilities. I hope it's an oil fire, in which case it will run out of oil and ultimately stop. But the more frightening possibility is that the zircaloy itself can burn, and that means the zircaloy's reached over 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. When that happens, it disintegrates, and the fuel pellets themselves are exposed directly to the fire and to the air, and they volatilize. So whatever radioactive material is in those fuel pellets can go volatile and be lifted up with the smoke and into the atmosphere. You know, the lucky thing, if there's one lucky thing in this event so far, it's that most of the time the wind has been blowing out to sea. If the wind turns and goes the other way, I would suspect contamination not just in Japan, but potentially Korea and China as well.
And let me ask you one last question on that. As we talk about the assessment of the crisis right here at this plant, in this complex with 6 reactors, there are 32 of these around the world, the Mark I reactors around the world. What questions would you be asking tonight? Is this a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence, and so if you have one of these plants anywhere else in the world, no sweat? Or are you asking some serious questions tonight?
The Mark I containment has been seriously flawed since it was built. It's been known since 1972 the NRC had expressed reservations about the Mark I containment. And in risk analysis in the 80s, they felt that there was a 90% chance that the Mark I containment would fail. So my opinion is that this is a flawed design, and you can't turn all 32 of them off tomorrow, but we should go about systematically eliminating those Mark I reactors.
Mr. Gunderson, we appreciate your help and insights. We're going to keep in touch as we try to get more information about this fire at reactor number 4 tonight and all 6 of those reactors in distress at that one plant. We'll keep in touch on that issue. We'll go back live to the region for the latest as well. And also ahead tonight, an American teacher in Japan desperately searches for his girlfriend. The town's usually 15 minutes away, not after the tsunami.